Hello, I'm Barry Fry from Central Intermediate Unit 10, and today's presentation is reporting special education students correctly affects your funding. Now, one of the things that seems to cause confusion is whenever a special education student is at a residential facility. And that seems to be the situation that causes the most uncertainty in reporting, whenever these children are in private facilities. So what this presentation is going to deal with are two situations of special ed kids in residential facilities, and the only difference being that one of the private institutions is being served by the local IU and the other is not. So just note that even though these children are in residential facilities, it has no effect on uh, reporting requirements for special ed. All right, and but what is affected or can be affected is who reports for October 1 enrollment and also child accounting membership. But how you report these students can affect your funding. If you report them incorrectly, then that will have a negative effect on your special education funding. So let's have a look at the agenda. Might appear a little bit overwhelming, but I think you'll see that with the knowledge of a few rules that you'll have a better understanding of who reports whom, when, and how. So let's get started. Now, a typical scenario could be that you have a child with a disability and transfer to a special, a private residential facility in another part of the state. The parents reside in your district and the student is there for the majority of the school year, and the service just happens to be provided by the local IU. So you're wondering, who reports this kid? So someone tells you, well, no, the facility reports the student. And another person says, no, 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 the district where the facility is located, they report the student. And another person overhears this conversation and said, wait, since the IU provides the service, they report the student. And finally, someone says, this child no longer resides in their district, he's residing somewhere else, so just remove him from our SIS. So yes, we have many, many questions. So let's see if we can clear up some of the confusion. So yes, I'm confused, and then I'm wondering, am I asking the right questions? And I suspect there might be some specific rules for these collections that might be different for special ed and child accounting and October 1. So if there are rules, I'm wondering where would I locate these rules and which collection from above there might have the biggest financial impact on my district. And if it has an impact on my district, do I happen to know how much? So how do I go about reducing my anxiety of making a mistake? Well, let's start by getting the answer to some questions. There are a couple who and where questions that might be helpful. Do the parents or guardians or foster parents, do they reside in my district? And if the student is placed outside my district, who is providing the service? And am I a charter school or am I a brick and mortar LEA? So another thing that can be helpful is that if I know, excuse me, what entities can report to PIMS. Well, I know LEAs can, which I am one. IUs, approved private schools can. Career tech centers, private residential rehabilitation institutions, they can report to PIMS. State juvenile correctional institutions, they can report to PIMS. So here's a question for you. Do licensed private academic or other private non-licensed schools or miscellaneous institutions report to PIMS? What do you think? The answer is no. Well, here's a little exercise for you that'll be helpful in other aspects of your job. There's a website called www.edna.pa.gov. www.edna.pa.gov. And let's suppose you would like to know how many APSs, how many approved private schools are in Pennsylvania. Well, if you go to that site and then you click on Search Education Entities, there's a checkbox there for approved private schools. You click on that and you'll be able to find out how many APSs are in Pennsylvania. That's a very good site to use that if you have a child in a private residential facility or even non-residential, that you can go there and find their AUN. Important to that whenever you're reporting special ed kids, that if you can actually find the AUN of the facility, that's very helpful to PDE. All right, let's start looking at some rules. So if the parents, guardians, or foster parents, if they reside in my district where I am a charter school, for the special ed collections, my district reports. My district reports for Act 16. My district reports for December 1 child count. My district reports for July transition exiting. And then you wonder, well, what about kids that are in residential facilities if they're not even in my district? This does not change even when the child is in residential placement. Well, let's look at for October 1 enrollment for special ed students. My district reports that's October 1 enrollment if the child is in my seat on October 1. Now, what about if the child is in residential placement? If the service is provided by an IU, another LEA, an APS, anybody that reports to PIMS, then that service provider reports the enrollment. So if the service is provided by someone who doesn't report to PIMS, then my district reports that enrollment just as if the student was in my building. And a little wrinkle there, of course. Sometimes there's an agreement between the home district, the resident district, and the host district. And sometimes in that situation there, the host district where that facility is located, they may report the enrollment. But if you are unsure, pick up the phone, make a call, be specific with your questions. All right, let's look at child accounting. Anytime the child is in my seat during the school year, I report, my district reports. But if the child is in residential placement, similar to a previous slide, if the service is being provided by someone who reports to PIMS, like an LEA, IU, APS, etc., that service provider reports the membership on my district's behalf. And if the service is being provided by a private entity, then my district reports the membership just as if my district were providing that service, right? And as before, there could be an agreement between the host district and the resident district, and where that facility is located, the host district, that is. They may report the membership, but if you are not sure, please call, ask your questions, and be specific. So other questions we might have, might be good to know the answers to, are having to do with our student information system. So if I have outplaced students, do I need to keep these kids in my SIS to report for special education? Probably do. And if I do, then can I create an out-of-district building? Because that might be helpful in tracking these kids. And there are situations where you would report and you would not report children for state and federal reporting. So I would think that my SIS would have that ability to do that. And does someone in my district know about state and federal reporting on who should be and who should not be reporting? So let's look at some templates. Let's look at the student template first. Contains one record for my district for each student for the year. And that template can be submitted during the various PIMS submissions and including the end of the year. It's a good advice to be reporting these on a regular basis, this template on a regular basis, because you want to keep the information in PIMS up to date. So I had talked about reporting rules. Where are the rules, the PIMS reporting rules? Well, if you go to www.education.pa.gov, go to Data and Reporting, then to PIMS, and then Manuals and Calendars. And there down the page, you will find two PIMS manuals, Volume 1 and Volume 2. Volume 1 will contain the records for each collection and specific information for each field, and then Volume 2 will contain appendices pertaining to codes that are required in Volume 1. So education.pa.gov. So let's start looking at fields in the student template. Field number 2 is the school number, and just a note there that if a child is in in our situation here for special education reporting, that if for our children that they're going to be in other facilities, we're going to use quad 9s for that because they're going to be educated in other LEAs. All right. This was formerly known as the location code. And the district of residence AUN, this is going to be the AUN of the school district where the parent or legal guardian resides. Doesn't matter if the child is at a residential facility, this is always going to be reported as the district of residence of the child, of the parents. And school number of residents, that's tied to 165, that's tied to 117. That's going to be the 4-digit building number of the code of the building where the student would attend, based on their home address of their parents and their grade level. So these two are tied together, and they're not going to change if a child is in residential placement. Special education referral. Whenever you have a special education student that receives 100% of their service from a PIMS reporting entity like an IU, that's going to be a Y. And this is going to be one of our situations because we're going to have a child that's at a private facility educated by the local IU. And then 217, the AUN of enrollment, that's where the AUN of the LEA that provides a majority of the students' educational academic education. And only PIMS reporting entities can appear there. And if you happen to have a child in a private facility that the service is being provided by them and they don't report to PIMS, then my district AUN should appear there for students whose majority of education is being provided by a non-PIMS reporting entity. And that's going to be one of our situations. Looking at the school enrollment template, the enrollment date, I like to look at that as an activity date, but enrollment date, and going along with the enrollment date is an enrollment code. So that enrollment code can be found in Volume 2 of the PIMS manual, Appendix E. So enrollment codes, WD12 and R12, a situation where they would be used would be, let's suppose that you have a child moving from one of your buildings to another one of your buildings for whatever reason, that you would use these two codes to show that it's withdrawing from one building and then re-entering in another building. We're going to use these two codes in a situation where we'll have a child going to a private residential facility that doesn't report to PIMS. So these are going to be the codes that we'll use to help track that. And if you happen to have a student that's going to a facility where he's being served by someone that reports to PIMS, like an IU, we would use WD02. And then whenever the student returns, we're going to use an E01 reentry code. So looking at the special education snapshot template, field number 2, school number, just like on the student template, it's going to be quad 9 for whenever a special ed child is being educated someplace other than his home district, right? And service provider, whoever is providing the service, this is where we will put the 9-digit AUN of who is providing the service. And this can be either a PIMS reporting entity or a non-PIMS reporting entity. And if the people providing the service, if the organization doesn't have an AUN, you can use text there and just put the name in. And then tied to the service provider is the location of special education services, field 71. And just a note there that quad 9 and quad 0 are no longer valid numbers. But this is where you're going to put the location of special education services. It's either going to be a PDE building number. It can only be a PDE building number if the child is being served in a public school building, and if the child isn't served in a public school building, then you would put the text of that location. But looking at field 70, just make the effort to find out if it's a private facility, do they have an AUN? Because it is helpful to PDE to find out just where children are being served, if they're being served by non-PIMS reporting entities. And then the school calendar fact template, this is where the days enrolled, present, and percentage of time is enrolled in a calendar. And just note that these fields are updatable. So let's look into the past. It's September 11, 2019. Shane Wilson, his parents reside in my district. He's an 11th grader, and my AUN is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I have a building number of 9009, and he's placed at Adelphi Manor Secure. And with the asterisk, it's a miscellaneous organization, their AUN. If you were to do a search in Edna for that AUN, you would be able to find out that they would be identified as a miscellaneous. And the service is being provided by the local IU8. And then Shane returns to my district on April the 1st. So September 11th happens to be on a Wednesday, and April 1 is also on a Wednesday in 2020. So I need to submit an update to PIMS because it's good practice, but September 25. So I'm going to use my student and school enrollment templates. My student template for Shane should have what in field 167 for special ed referral? Well, if we have a look at the manual, special education referral, that if 100% of the service is being provided by someone who reports to PIMS, that should be a Y. So I believe IU8 is providing the service, and IU8 does report to PIMS. So that special education referral, that answer should be a Y for 167. Well, what about 217, the field for AUN of enrollment? Looking at our manual, it's the AUN of the LEA who provides the majority of the core academic information, and only entities that report to PIMS can appear there. So we know that IU8 does report to PIMS, so they're providing the service, so their AUN should appear there. Okay, for Shane on his school enrollment template, his activity or enrollment date is going to be, he enrolled there on the 11th, so, we could report him as leaving us on September 10, and his enrollment code, well, since he's going to a facility that he's going to be reported by the local IU, then that's actually he's going to be served by another public LEA, so that's why we would use WD02. Now, if we look at Addison, his twin brother, also 11th grade, his parents reside in my district. My building number, same building number, 9009. And here, Adelphi Millville has their AUN there, and they indicate that they're a licensed private academic school. They do not report to PIMS. They provide the service, and he returned to my district on April 1, just as Shane did. So we need to update PIMS for Addison using his student and school enrollment template. So the template field 167 for a special ed referral, should that be a Y or an N? Well, if you look in the manual, remember the manual that 100% of the service being provided by someone who reports to PIMS? Well, we know that Adelphi Millville does not report to PIMS, so we are suspecting that that might be an N, and we are correct. So what about the AUN of enrollment? What would we put there? Well, if we can remember that only PIMS, only entities that report to PIMS can show up there, and we know that Adelphi Millville does not report to PIMS, so the note at the bottom says my district AUN should appear there for students whose majority of education is provided by a non-PIMS reporting entity. So what shows up there? My AUN. So looking at Addison, he should have 2 records, one withdrawing from my building and one entering a private residential building, because he's going to a residential treatment facility that doesn't report to PIMS. So let's take a walk through here. This is where we're going to use those WD12 and R12, because we're going to treat this as if the child is going from my building to a private building. So we need to be able to track that within PIMS. So should have 2 records, one for withdrawing and one for entering. So let's look at for the one for withdrawing. You know, what are we going to put for enrollment date? We're going to pull that he left us on September 10, and his withdrawal code is WD12. And then we need to show him entering that private residential building. How are we going to do that? We're going to show him with that date of September 11, and then his enrollment in that private residential building, that's going to be an R12. And if we look at the 2 records pertaining to the school enrollment template, you can see that we have the school number 9009 when he left us with the WD12, and then when he entered that other that private building, quad 9s on 11th, and he's got an R11 code. All right. Okay, let's look at child accounting reporting. So we need to track outplaced students for child accounting. Let's talk about Addison. For child accounting, do I report the time while Addison is at Adelphi Millville as being enrolled in my district? Well, you must remember that Addison, he's at a facility that does not report to PIMS. Somebody has to report him. So do I report him as being enrolled in my district? Yes, we do. And the reason we do that is because that service is being provided by an entity that doesn't report to PIMS. So my district reports the membership just as if my district was reporting the service. So if I wish to track this time where Addison is at Adelphi Millville, how could I handle this for child accounting reporting? Well, one thing I could do is that I could create a calendar ID to identify the location as Adelphi Millville, and that would help me track him at that facility. So let's talk about Shane. Is Shane being served by a PIMS reporting agency? Well, if I remember correctly, he's being served by IU8, and we know that IUs report to PIMS, so the answer is yes. So just gave you the answer. Who reports Shane during his outplacement for child accounting? We know that IU8 reports him, all right? So I'm wondering now, do I lose child accounting credit during this outplacement? Do I lose credit? The answer is no, you do not. And why is that? Because that service being reported by the IU, that then gets reported, that membership gets reported on my district's behalf and then gets credited back to me at the end of the school year. So I don't lose credit. Looking at October 1 enrollment, there are the districts, those are the institutions that report for October 1 enrollment. They should look a little bit familiar. So today is October 1. October 1 student snapshot should include only students being educated by the LEA, if the student is in your seat. And the information on the October 1 enrollment It's going to be official public total enrollment. It's for your student performance profile, Title I, etc. So I'll be asking these kinds of questions throughout just to emphasize that each PIMS collection is separate. So is the submission separate from the December 1 child count? And is the submission separate from child accounting at the end of the year collection? So we know it's different from the December 1 child count, and we do know that it's different from child accounting at the end of the year. So just remember, all these collections are separate. They have their own rules. So continuing on with the October 1 student snapshot, should only include students being educated by an LEA. So Addison student template, student snapshot for October 1 should have what? Obviously, it should have October 1 for the snapshot date. And what about this special education referral? Should be a no. And why is that? Because he's not being served by someone who reports to PIMS. So the AU of enrollment should be me. All right, because he's being served by, he's being served by an entity that doesn't report to PIMS. So if we remember the rules, my AUN has to appear there. So we're looking at Shane's, his snapshot date, October 1. Special education referral, if we remember correctly, IU is providing the service, they report to PIMS, and whoever is providing 100% of the service, that should be a Y. So special ed referral, that should be a Y for field 167. Then the AUN of enrollment, only entities that report to PIMS are going to appear here. So that's going to be IU8's AUN. So if we go to December 1, even though December 1 occurs on Sunday, that still is going to be the snapshot date. So it's December 3, and asking that question, is this submission separate from what will be submitted at the end of the year for child accounting? What do we think the answer is? Special education is special. So yes, it is separate. And in addition to being identified as a special ed student, what must the student have to be part of this submission? What do you think she's to have? Should have an active IEP. Okay, so since the IU is providing the service for Shane during December 1, does the IU report Shane for December 1? Remember the rules. District of residence of parents, guardians, foster parents report for special ed. So IU8 does not report for December 1 child count. So who reports? My district. It's my responsibility to report the child. And why? Because the parents reside in my district, and probably the same thing for Addison. His parents reside in my district. So that's why I report for December 1 child count. So Addison's special ed snapshot template, snapshot date's going to be December 1, even though that was a Sunday. And the service provider, we know that that's a private entity, but they do have an AUN, and that happens to be Adelphi Millville. That's their AUN, and then we put their name in for the Field 70 location of special ed services. Even though Field 70 would allow you to put text, I encourage you, make the effort to find out if a facility really does have an AUN, and please put that in there. So if we look at Shane's special ed snapshot template, same thing for snapshot date, right? December 1. Service provider, if we remember, IU8 is providing the service, so their AUN needs to appear there. And then the location is going to be the name of the facility, Adelphi Manor Secure. So I know that my local IU provides a pre-PIMS check service to check my templates, and they send them to the PD spot checker. So what templates should I send to my local IU? I should send them my special ed snapshot and my student template. And what that does is that allows me to find any errors and fix them up before I submit them to the PIMS sandbox and then PIMS production. So I recommend that you take advantage of that service. So now it's April 9. Should I update PIMS? Well, of course we should, because they're back in my district and it's good practice. We want to keep PIMS up to date. So to update this information, what templates am I going to use? I'm going to use my student and school enrollment. So for both Shane and Addison, what would be in their student templates? What would be their in the school number? If we remember way back when, I said that my my building number was 9009. So that's what it should appear there. And since they're no longer at a residential treatment facility, and since Shane is not being served by the IU anymore, so there should be an N for that special education referral for Field 167. And I'm providing the education, the AUN. So what do you think should be in 217? Should be my AUN. And on the enrollment template for Shane, the enrollment date would be April 1, and the enrollment code coming back would be an E01. For Addison, very likely it should be the same, right? Okay. So end of year child accounting. It's now June 14. Refreshing my memory, Shane was at my school 2 different time periods, from the beginning of the school to September 10, and then he was outplaced, and then he came back on April 1 to the last day of school. So for Shane, what templates do I submit? I'm going to submit the school calendar and the student calendar fact. So is this submission separate from special education submissions? Yes, we know that. And also, do I report Shane's membership and attendance for the entire year? Well, think about this. IU8 was providing the service for part of the year, and remembering that they would report for me, and that time gets attributed back to me. So I don't report membership and attendance for the entire year, because IU8 is going to report Shane's time at Delphi Manor Secure. They will report on my behalf, and then that time gets credited back to me. So let's look at the special education transition exits finally. So spend some time and listen here, because we get many, many questions on who should be on this submission. So here we go. Any student who has a transition plan, and that means any age. It's possible for a student to have a transition plan at any age. Unusual, but possible. So any student who has a transition plan, any age. Any student 14 years or older as of July 1 of the current school year. And this always include even those who may not have a transition plan. Even though a child should have a transition plan by 14, there may be a few that don't, but you still should always include them, all right? And any of the above students with a valid IEP anytime during the school year, all right? And if any of the above exits special education, you need to include the exit date and the exit reason. So here's another way of looking at that information. Down at the bottom, I'm asking, let's suppose that Shane or Addison, let's suppose that neither have a transition plan. Should they appear on this collection? Well, they're 11th graders. How old do you think they are? They really should appear there, because they were 14 years or older as of July 1. So looking at both of their snapshot templates at the end of the year, the snapshot dates are going to be June 30, not going to be your last day of school. It's going to be June 30. That's the snapshot date. And the service provider is going to be me. That's my AUN. And the location of services is going to be my building number, the 9009. So I'm wondering if anything surprised you today on this presentation. And Think about what do you think causes confusion between these collections? Do you think it has something to do with whenever these, if the kid is at a resident facility, maybe I don't report it. Well, just remember that district of residence of parent, guardian, foster parents, charter schools report for special education. If you can remember that, that will save you a lot of aggravation and possibly prevent you from making a mistake. Not too long ago, there was a school district that had missed 11 students who were in residential placement. Now, I'd asked before about, do I know about the financial implication to my district on making a mistake? Well, if you underreport a special education student, that cost of your district is going to be you're going to be shorted about $1,100 of IDEA funds. So this one district, they found out that they had not reported 11 students who were in residential placement. That's over $11,000. And when they realized that, they were not able to correct it. So there was no way for them to recover that money. So it is very, very important that you pay attention to these children that are outplaced. All right. If the parents, guardians, foster parents reside in your district, you report to special education. And you want to make sure that if they're outplaced on December 1, that you report them so that you get credit for that. So think about some steps that you might use to clear the waters. Make sure that you report these kids correctly. One of the big things that you could do is communication among the different parties within your district to make sure that everybody is on the same page. I'd like to include this quote from a music instructor that I think is apropos here. That quote is, "If you think about it, you'll never have to think about it. And if you don't think about it, you'll always have to think about it." So the way I take this is that you need to know what you're doing. You need to think about what you're doing, commit it to memory so that it becomes automatic. Because if you don't think about it, you're always going to have to think about it. And if you're in that situation, opportunity to make a mistake. So how are we doing? I think we're doing pretty well. We're happy. We understand the rules of reporting for special education, October 1, child accounting. So I think we've got it all taken care, right? All right. Again, I'm Barry Fry from Central Intermediate 10. There's my contact information. And I hope you found this presentation helpful. Thank you.